so I take over. So welcome all to the second seminar session of the Iberian Group of Urban Ecology. And on behalf of Juan, Antonio, Jessica, and I, coordinators, we welcome you all. Today we have the pleasure of having Dr. Gema Trigos, who is an ecologist and entomologist and currently assistant professor at the Museum and Institute of Zoology from the Polish Academy of Science. So Gema did her studies in the University of Córdoba, and she did her PhD in biology, which she finished in 2015. I think like a bit before finishing the PhD, she just commented to us, she moved to Warsaw to start her new position in the museum. And since then, she's been also doing some research stays in Doñana, in Romania, in Germany. She's also an active member of several associations and societies, including the AEET, the Asociación Española de Entomología, and the International Union for the Study of Social Insects. And her work is very much focused, as far as I'm concerned, on ecology and evolution, as well as community ecology and invasive species. And as a main topic, she works in urban ecology, forest ecosystems, and behavior, with, I think, 2 ongoing projects on the effects of urbanization on ant communities. So, well, welcome, Gema. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation to participate in our seminar series. And yeah, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me all. And well, I will start sharing my screen. And just let me know if you cannot see it properly. Okay. Well, we all have heard or listened how ant communities and other arthropods change in urban ecosystems. And in this talk, I would like to talk about just some background mechanisms shaping these ant communities. But before jumping into the topic, I would like to show you something about ants for those people who knows nothing about this organism. Ants are widespread insects that are distributed all around the earth. They are in almost all terrestrial ecosystems, of course, not in the frozen one like the Antarctica. They are very diverse with more than 15,000 described species, and there are still many other species to be described. And they exert a very important impact in our ecosystems. But if you think about ants, they are tiny animals. So I would like to think, in your case, how it is possible that they exert such impact. If you think a lion getting into your room right now, I believe that impact is not the same that one ant getting into your room, because many times the impact is linked to the size. So again, how it's possible? Well, because ants are numerous. The biomass of ants on Earth overpass the total biomass of wild birds and mammals together. So they are a lot. And this is important, but it's not everything. Because still they are diminutive, so ants are like this. They are not single individuals, and they are part of a major organization because they belong to a group of insects called social insects. This major organization is composed by thousands of individuals, hundreds, maybe sometimes if they are smaller, and they are perfectly coordinated to perform all the tasks that the colony needs to survive. This is even more. They are such well coordinated that they work as a single organism. And this is how some authors call a colony a superorganism. Okay, this is very important, but how it is in ecological studies? Well, ants are bioindicators. They are very reliable organisms when evaluating different ecosystems because they have this series of characteristics. They are widely distributed and highly abundant, as I said before. So it allows you to compare different habitats and the different type of microhabitats. For example, they also perform key roles in the ecosystem. So when some colonies or some species are disappearing from a habitat, you can see the impact of the ecosystem, indicating to you that something is happening. And this is because they are strongly linked to the ecosystems, so it makes them highly sensitive to the environmental changes. And something very important, they are easy to sample. So you can just collect them during direct search. You walk and collect them directly with your hands. You can use pitfall traps, toolgram, many different methods. Well, once we know that they are useful to analyze the impact of different factors, we jump on urbanization. Urbanization is a widespread phenomenon. It's happening all around the world. It's unstoppable and it's changing, it's leading drastic changes in habitats. You have first something natural like a forest or like, I don't know, a meadow and suddenly it changed to a jungle of pavement and buildings. This is affecting our biodiversity, and studying it could be difficult sometimes because another particularity of urbanization is that it's a dynamic phenomenon. So changes in the cities and in the landscape of the cities is strongly linked to development and technology and architecture. Well, in general terms, urbanization, I would say that is a bit unknown. Actually, after more than 100 years studying the impact of urbanization on land communities, there are still some novel studies or relatively novel studies showing that we still don't know many things about urban impact. And actually, they identify something like light pollution, night warming, or homogeneity of the homogenization of the habitat as novel threats, which is something a bit weird because it was happening from the beginning of from the origin of the city, but we still don't know how it exactly works. Well, in general terms, urban ecosystems exert two types of impact, or the impact of urban ecosystem is organized or can be organized in two main groups, the abiotic factors and biotic factors. Well, as abiotic factors, we will treat in this talk the landscape composition and management, the urban heat island effect focusing in night warming, artificial light at night, and as biotic factors, we will focus in competitive interaction and nutritional sources. Urbanization, the abiotic factors, well, how it affects the landscape composition and their management will affect our communities because they are the source for nesting and for providing them food sources, water, everything they need for living. And the other two abiotic factors in this talk, the urban heat island and the artificial light at night, they will impact the phenology of our ants because they are poikilotherms and they follow a circadian rhythm of illumination. Well, the structure of our habitats, of our granaries into the city is very important from a conservation point of view because they will allow them to have different nesting resources. More diverse habitat like botanical gardens, for example, or more natural habitats like the urban forest will be essential in the case of conservation of specialist species, more sensitive and that can easily disappear with strong disturbances. And for example, urban parks characterized by homogeneous landscape, large lawns with some few bushes or trees can be drastic for the conservation of these sensitive species. This is, for example, not the case of generalist species, more plastic ones, also characterized by the presence of invasive and exotic species, which we know that they are certainly capable of colonizing most of the habitat types. And urban habitats, in this case, they show that they are suitable even for them. Okay, structure is important, but also it's important how much time we leave or we give urban granaries to recover after disturbances. In this study, for example, we compare the biodiversity of a young garden a few years after its construction with the biodiversity found in 3 old or major gardens with very close location to this young one. And we found that the young garden had a different community assemblage, a different species assemblage than the all 3 ones that were more similar to the natural habitats. This young garden was characterized by the presence of more synanthropic species. But also we observed over the years that the community of this young garden was changing in the direction to the other 3 gardens, because they were provided, this young garden was provided with the arrival of different native species from the surrounding natural habitats. So yeah, time is important. We need them to rest. The other topic or the other important factor in cities is the urban heat island effect. That means that city centers are significantly warmer than the natural surrounding habitats, because you have different things producing and releasing heat in the city center, plus the refreshment is more difficult because the wind cannot flow properly through the different buildings there. This is important during the day and will influence or can set certain threats in our biodiversity because of the high temperatures, but it's essential in the nights where the only temperature you have is the one from the release from the different components of this environment. Well, following the urban heat island theory, we went in the night to the natural and to rural and urban habitats in 5 different cities in the north of Europe. There were 3 cities in Poland and 2 in Germany, and we compared at the same time the temperatures in the urban parts and in the natural surrounding habitats. And results show what was expected. Urban habitats were significantly or tend to be significantly warmer than rural habitats in general. But the urban heat island theory also tells you that the significance of this difference is strongly linked with the size of the city. And this is what we found. The stronger differences in temperatures was found in the largest city of these 5 studied ones, and we didn't find any significant difference in the case of the smaller city. Okay, this is very nice, this is temperature, but we were interested in how it impacts the foraging activity of our ants. And actually, the foraging activity followed almost similar pattern. The activity of our urban population was generally higher in urban areas compared with the rural ones, but we found the highly significant differences in the case of the largest city, where we found the largest differences in temperature, and we found a different pattern in the case of the small city, similar that we found with the temperature. Again, we have another problem here, and is that this is just the reflection of a field work. And in the field, you have or you can have different kind of factors affecting your variable, for example. In this case, the foraging activity. So what we did was to replicate this experiment or this study at the laboratory. And in this case, everything is under control. We had a thermal chamber simulating urban temperatures, a thermal chamber simulating rural temperatures, so they were cooler. But then we also had a third chamber simulating natural or rural environments in terms of temperature, but adding our third variable, the artificial light at night. So we kept the illumination for 24 hours to check if it is affecting the foraging activity. Well, results actually follow the same pattern that in the field work. In Warsaw populations, we had a sort of higher foraging activity in the warm chamber. In the Regensburg population, we had a higher activity in the cool chamber, simulating the rural activity. So like here, same pattern. But then when we check the light influence, or the influence of light pollution, we found same pattern. In both cases, the activity was increasing. And actually, in this case, the response was stronger in the case of rural populations. Thermal or temperature in the city is not only influencing foraging activity, but it's also influencing development because they are poikilotherm, as I said. So in our study, we follow the development of the brood in the thermal chamber simulating the rural environment and the thermal chamber simulating the urban environment. And we found, of course, a faster development in the urban population, in the urban chamber. But things are not always perfect, and we have the yin and the yang, and this faster development of our brood was sort of compensated by the higher mortality of our workers because of heat stress. But here we find something very interesting, as we saw in the previous results, and it is once again, rural populations show a stronger response. Well, somehow our results suggest that urban populations will sort of adapt to this kind of environment, warmer with light, and the rural populations have not this sort of adaptation, so they have to get profit of these temporary better conditions or suitable conditions for more activity, let's say, and also they are more damaged. Rural populations or urban habitats are also differing from rural ones in terms of landscape composition or structure, as I showed in previous slides. And that can be translated in different locomotory traits between urban and rural populations. So we were interested, we checked that, and we actually found that urban populations were spending longer time immobile. They were slower in their movements, they were traveling longer distances, and they were less explorative. So yeah, it seems that there is a difference between the two habitat types. But there is something more, because we also found that urban populations spend longer time in the safe area of the arena. It means that they were less bold. So somehow they were, or they seem to face different threats when foraging in this habitat. In our case, we would like to think that this is just habitat structure, but why not to think that there is also a combined effect with the different species interactions? Well, this lead us to the biotic factors, competitive interactions, and nutritional sources. Because species have to compete if they want to succeed. Urban habitats are characterized by the arrival of exotic and invasive species. To make you a brief idea, about that, just checking quickly, not you don't need a deep search. You can find that only, for example, in Malaga, in the coastal area, not even in the whole area of Malaga, you can find up to 10 different exotic species, and among them, there are some highly invasive ones. This is, of course, impacting our biodiversity, is changing the community and the assemblages, they are species assemblages. And it's highlighted in the case of the combined effect of different exotic species coexisting. From a biodiversity point of view, this is important, but it's not the only one, because they have been shown to cause major economic loss in the countries. Well, if they are so problematic, why not to just fight them? It could be easy, no, they are just ants. But it seems it's not. They are plastic, they are capable of adapting, they are capable of many things, even from a behavioral point of view. For example, in our study, we found an area in which two highly invasive species are coexisting, the Lasius neglectus and the Linepithema humile, the two main or major invasive species occurring in Europe. These species are highly aggressive, so how it's possible they compete and they coexist? Well, they adapt their behavior, they modify that. And for example, in the case of Linepithema humile, although it's not well visible here, we can see that the aggressive flow of behavior is a bit different to the one shown by Lasius neglectus. The Argentine ants show to be a bit more like explorative behavior, and Lasius neglectus is jumping straight away to aggressive behavior. So how can they coexist? Well, they perfectly match. In that area in which they were coexisting, we, of course, thought that they are not arriving at the same time. It's not logical to think that two invasive species are parallelly arriving to the place. So we we simulated a situation in which the Argentine ant was more numerous because this species arrived earlier to this habitat, and then it was followed by Lasius neglectus. Considering the aggressiveness of both, this one wouldn't have any chance, the Lasius neglectus wouldn't have any chance of establishing. However, we actually found out that the Argentine ant was capable of reducing the aggressiveness in these areas in which this species coexist with Lasius neglectus. And this second one was increasing the aggressiveness in this habitat or this area in which it was coexisting. So the numerical disadvantage of this second species could compensate the lower aggressiveness shown by Linepithema humile, two different strategies that match perfectly to allow their coexistence, the dear enemy and the bourgeois strategy. Well, species do not only compete for competing, they are because they need to monopolize resources. And this is leading us to another factor that is really problematic or potentially problematic in urban habitats, the nutritional constraints. Food is important. Feeding is the key of life. When you are feeding, when you are eating, organisms are provided with the energy and the material for construction or the biological structures that they need for performing all the physiological reactions. Well, this is such important that actually colonies perform collective choices of the most suitable food source. And this is not a deliberate choice, but this is made just following to compensate or seeking to compensate the nutritional deficiencies in the colony. Still, they are interested or they are willing to invest more, and they produce pheromones to make more efficient this foraging trail to this important food source. They are even creating symbiotic systems to provide each other with the nutrients they need. And they are able to modify their behavior to fiercely defend this food source, because it is important. It can impact your colony from the very beginning, from the foundation through a different or a weakness, a weakened queen. Well, in this study, for example, we are thinking about this importance and how it can shape communities in urban environment, mostly when you are considering that you are having different species with similar tents or similar nutritional choices in a small reduced habitat, where maybe you have some lack of nutrients. Feeding of the colonies, or the target of the colonies is to get all nutrients, either getting access to a very balanced food or combining different and balanced food, and finally getting all the nutrients you need. So in this case, we have Lasius niger and Myrmica rubra, which have basically same nutritional needs and same nutritional choices. And at the same time, they share the habitats. So they should compete, but competing full time is not the best because of the high mortality. So we were thinking that maybe they can use different strategies. We produced 3 different artificial diets with a different ratio of carbohydrates and proteins. And we offer to the urban and rural colonies of Lasius niger and Myrmica rubra. And we obtained that in general, they show what they are. They are generalistic species. They have no special differences in their preferences, in their nutritional preferences. To do that, we use this bridge, and we were recording the ads and we were waiting how much they were eating. But the thing is, like, when we go to the different colonies, the urban and rural colonies, and we separate them, checking the food intake or the food preferences just after collection, and during weeks after their collection, in between they were fed with very rich and balanced food, we can find the differences. And whereas rural colonies of Lasius niger seems to be more picky when choosing food, urban colonies do not follow this pattern, and they are more generalist, just using every resource they can have. In the case of Myrmica rubra, we found different pattern. So actually, they seem to modify their food preferences to reduce competition. Well, this is just suggesting or thinking that urban habitats can be poorer in terms of nutritional sources. So we did this other experiment in which we are using more natural food. As carbohydrates, we were using a sugar solution, and as protein, we were using tuna, and here we had tuna enriched with oil. Again, we collected this time only urban and rural colonies of Lasius niger, and we offered the food. And in all cases, we found a higher intake of carbohydrates than proteins. But again, we find a difference between urban and rural colonies. And the intake of carbohydrates was higher in the case of urban colonies than in rural ones. And the difference between the intake of carbohydrates and proteins was stronger in urban colonies than in rural ones. Again, this is an artificial situation, and we are the laboratory. So this experiment was repeated in field using different concentration of sugar solutions. And we had from lower concentration, so poorer quality if you are an ant, to higher quality of food. And we found the same pattern. Actually, urban colonies are ready to accept lower quality of food than urban colonies, than rural ones. And this is important because ants' choice is performed in base of their previous experience. Like in human, if you are used to lower quality, when they give you a bit higher, then you are ready to accept it. But if you are used to high quality, when they give you lower quality, you are not ready to accept it. You want to keep your high quality. So all results till now are showing a potential poorer availability of food source in urban habitats. If it is true, it should be shown or should be reflected in some physiological traits in ants. So we went to the queens because they are the important part of the colony. The production of the colony depends on hair. And we actually found that the body fat content in urban queens was significantly lower than in rural ones. So it seems that you are feeding in lower quality food. And this is important because body fat content is strongly related with the capacity of reproduction. And then the growth of the colony. Well, feeding also can be more important because, as I said, the food provides you with the materials for construction or the biological structure for your biological reactions. In this study, we wanted to measure how this feeding is helping you to face one of the most important or one important factor in urban habitats, the thermal resistance, so the high temperatures, as I said before, urban heat island effect. Well, ants have to be prepared for this thermal impact. So we were checking the two main factors helping them to do that, the heat shock proteins and cuticular hydrocarbons. Heat shock proteins help you with the reconstruction of these unfold proteins because of the heat stress, and cuticular hydrocarbons help you to know the heat rate. So they are key factors in this matter. In our experiment, we wanted to check how the nutrition is important for that, for regulating the heat shock proteins and to produce cuticular hydrocarbons. So we produced 5 different artificial diets, differing in the ratio of essential amino acids, so the most important part of the proteins, because they need to be intake, they cannot be produced by ants, and the carbohydrates. The red is the one with higher content of essential amino acids, which is very good quality of proteins, but highly toxic. And we are decreasing this ratio to the white diet with very low or almost insignificant amount of essential amino acids, and almost everything is carbohydrates. We fed the ants with that, and we put the ants in these thermal plates. This is a modification of what is the thermal resistant experiments, the common one, in which people put the ants in the small tubes, they put them on thermal plates, and they just wait for them to fade because it's too hot. But this is pretty cruel. So we wanted to be better people with ants because after we like them. And what we did was this modification. We have a chamber on the thermal plate in which we are increasing the temperature up to 48 degrees. And here we have another chamber that is out of the thermal plate, and they are connected. So we are increasing the temperature, and when it's too much for the ants, that you can see they are alive, they are running here, they can just simply leave the chamber. And actually, we had very low rate of death. After submitting them to this thermal stress, we measure the history of protein 70, which is responsible for to repair the misfold proteins. And we also measure the history of proteins 83, which are responsible for preparing the ants to this thermal tolerance. And we also did something else that was to feed the ants in the on the different diets and put them in thermal chamber with high temperature for a while, and later we check these cuticular hydrocarbons, which, as I said, is the protection layer for dehydration. Results show that actually feeding them with higher proportion or lower proportion of proteins was not affecting the upregulation of the history of proteins in urban ants. But it was affecting the upregulation of history of proteins in the case of rural ones. These populations were choosing low proportion of proteins, of essential amino acids, but still they need their presence. In the case of the history of protein 83, we found actually that it is important, the diet, for the upregulation in the urban colonies. And actually, a balanced diet with, let's say, high proportion of essential amino acids, but also a good proportion of carbohydrates was perfect to produce significantly higher amount or to have a significantly higher response of proteins 83. But this is not happening in the case of rural ants. In the case of cuticular hydrocarbons, the same diets show same patterns that in the protein 83. In urban populations, the green diet, good proportion of proteins and carbohydrates, show to produce a thicker layer of cuticular hydrocarbons, so a thicker protection for dehydration, but it didn't happen in the case of rural ants, where the response was more or less similar in all diets. To summarize, in this case, urban populations or a balanced diet between proteins and carbohydrates show to provide a proper protection to this heat stress in urban populations, with a protection to the heat stress at the level of proteins, so helping you to decrease the damages with the heat stress, but also helping you to not lose your water. So to summarize, urban ecosystems show the populations in urban ecosystems show to be regulated by different kind of biotic and abiotic factors. And in general, urban biodiversity show to be the results of a combined effect of these two kinds of factors. And the nature and management of the urban granaries was very important in terms of conservation, mostly in the case of specialist species. But remember, not only the construction and the structure of the granaries was important, also the aging, so the time to recover the native biodiversity of the area, influenced by the surrounding habitats. Also, environmental factors are key for shaping our own communities, because higher temperature in the cities and also a higher light or continuous light illumination allows a longer foraging time, a better provision of food for these colonies or these species that are strongly adapted to urban habitats, and they allow to have a better conditions for them and to face up the not so favored species. The availability of food was also important because it plays a crucial role in the survival of the ant populations in terms of protecting them from the heat stress, but also helping them to better development. And finally, because it helps or it influenced the community assemblages by modifications in the food choice or nutritional choice of the coexisting species. However, all of these are just, let's say, some sort of preliminary results showing some evolutionary traits at different levels. And it's still necessary to perform further studies and deeper, more specific studies to really understand how the different urban factors can affect our communities. And these are not the only factors, of course. This is just, from my point of view, a very small representation of all the different factors that we can find in urban environments. So actually, there is too little known about this changing ecosystem. And finally, I would like to thank all my collaborators, of course, because without them, it could be impossible to perform all of these studies. And of course, the institution funding these studies, and all of these organizations and the city halls allowing us year after year collecting the samplings and doing our experiments. And finally, of course, to all of you for your interest and for spending your time in my talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emma, for your clear talk about the ants and the urban and the difference with rural. It was super clear for everyone that, for example, me, I don't work with ants and I understand everything. So Joan, we coordinate now the question, the turn.
Exactly. Yeah, well, thank you very much as well. I work with bees, so it's also nice to see people working on the same order, but with different species and organisms. So we have some time for questions. Maybe you can use the raise the hand function. And yeah, so anyone who wants to ask a question, please feel free to raise your hand and unmute yourself. Okay, if there is no yet a question, I'll give you some time to think. I have one. Well, I have several, but I will start with the first one.
Okay.
So you mentioned as the biotic factors that are very important for driving ant communities in urban areas, the temperature and the light pollution. But I was wondering about the soil properties. Is it not very important how the soil is, or the soil contamination or so?
Well, this is something that we still don't know. I was actually trying to check it, but I still didn't have the chance. And actually, we still don't. It is pretty difficult to know yet because there are not studies like that. And on the one hand, you have in general, urban environments can be poorer. On the other hand, they are fertilized. Then plant composition are different, and in this term, they absorb different nutrients from the soil, but also they, you have different filters. One from the nutrients that you are having from the soil, but the nutrients that are absorbed by the plants, the nutrients absorbed by the aphids, because ants are feeding on honeydew produced by aphids. So we actually don't really know yet what is arriving to the ants, what they are producing. Maybe soil is impacting a lot. Maybe they don't. It doesn't. it's also important the variety of sources that they have there, because as I said, different plants can produce different honeydews. So maybe as we saw in this slide, you might not reach your nutritional homeostasis just feeding on one very complete food source, but combining different and complete food sources. So yes, soil may influence, may not. If I have the chance, I will certainly check it. But well, let's see. I need the funders for that.
Perfect, thank you.
You know, money is always a key.
Yeah, always a limiting factor. Okay, we have Juan, Antonio. Go ahead.
Yeah, so my question is, how do you think your results, because in general, the results has been clear between rural, urban. How do you think those results could change if the study system will be in the tropics, for example? So in places in which the cold temperature, for example, regarding the urban heat, or the light in the nocturne and the winter months is not a limitation.
Well, I think this is, at least for me right now, it's a bit difficult to find the trend. Actually, I just applied for something like that with a guy from Vietnam. If we get that, we might be able to just throw some preliminary trends. The thing is like, if you go to the tropics, you directly change the pattern. So higher if you go to, for example, in Poland, in forests, you will have higher biodiversity outside of forest and things like that, because you have better conditions. You have more light, more soil, more temperature, and this is important for species in poikilotons. And the more specialized but reduced biodiversity will be found in forest, within the forest. But if you go to tropics, it's totally opposite pattern. And it's highly dependent on the functional traits of the species, which is a species specific. So actually, these results are part of, let's say, populations from the north. And you have local adaptations. So these trends might vary if they are produced or they are performed. The studies are performed in South Spain, for example, or if they are performed in different places, because biodiversity is different and species are different. They have different adaptations. So we are basically working with the cold adapted species, not exactly like that, but sort of, and it's opposite in the south. So I fully against of generalizations. We usually say like this is like this, and we ignore the local adaptations. If you remember, when we compare Regensburg with Warsaw, we have different trends, and but with different trends in temperature, different trends in activity, and actually we might have different trends in different things, because they are very local adaptations. So it's really difficult, at least for me, to establish a clear pattern on that.
Thank you. We have another raised hand. So Sole, you can go ahead.
Hello.
Hi, Sole.
First of all, congratulations for all your jobs, the job you are doing is so important when we speak about the roles of the urban green spaces for the conservation of species. So congratulations. My question is, due to, the green spaces here in the south of Spain, in Andalusia, and in northern areas, in northern countries, I don't know, but I think that the management of these species are very different. I mean, in Andalusia, for example, in Cordoba, you know that the green areas are usually big lawns with some trees, while in the Northern Europe, you have much more trees and bushes. So which species do you think that would be better for the conservation of the native species, and why?
Well, I think that there is not, again, a general pattern. You have to adapt your greenery to the biodiversity requirements. The biodiversity, the species composition is totally different in the north than in the south. So we cannot adopt the same strategy in both places. Of course, there are some key things that maybe can be generalized as the basis of the structure for better conservation, and then small adaptations according to the place. It's true that in the north and in the south, the parks are different. And but still, they follow the same pattern. Even if, for example, in Poland or in Warsaw, the one I know the most, you have very rich parks and so on. Many parts of these parks are characterized for the open area, just a large lawn, and that's it, and surrounded by different bushes and trees. It's, of course, a different structure than in Spain, but again, it's the same. Different to the natural habitats and very homogeneous if you compare to natural habitats. From my point of view, the better strategy for conservation could be using the most natural plants as possible, like a native plant species, because our species and the species are strongly adapted to natural native plants. A combination of open areas, because it's important to have open areas in both places. We have in the north, Myrmica species, Lasses species, they like open, but some Temnotores as well, for example. But if you go to the south, you have your Cataglyphis, the Camponotus, like the Barbaricus or the Crentatus in the mountains, of course, not in urban areas. But you have species that they seek for open habitats. We still have species that they seek for wood, for meadows, so it should be a combination. We cannot remove the recreational part or role of the urban habitats because actually of the urban greeneries, because actually it's created for people to enjoy. It makes no sense to just close everything because we want to protect our biodiversity. And the key would be to bring closer people to biodiversity instead of separating them. So just saving some spots or with low management or lacking of management for species protections, those that they need the debris and everything, and some open areas for species that don't care if they are disturbed or not, could be a perfect combination either in the north or the south, or doesn't matter where, for an urban greenery. And then what we put in those places could be local dependent. This is my idea. Maybe I'm wrong.
Okay,
thanks, Gema. We have another question, Jessica.
Hi, Gema. Congratulations for your talk. I really enjoyed it a lot. I have a question. I don't know if I missed it when you are talking about it. So when you sample wild populations, how many points in the city did you check? I mean, how local are these adaptations?
No, they are exactly, I mean, we have exactly the same number of samples in all places. So if you simply 3 in the And urban environments, you simply also 3 in natural habitats or rural habitats. So there is always same number, they in parallel. And usually the slower combination we are using are 3 urban areas, distant. So like, let's say north, south, and the one side of the city. I was close to the city center because it's where you have a stronger effect, and parallel rural habitats of one of each side. Okay, so you have urban rural, and urban rural. And within each part, we are also using different distant populations, like at least 3 colonies from each habitat. So basically, the minimum sample size is 9 colonies from urban, 9 colonies from rural.
Okay,
This is
and how much variation do you have like for the urban ones? Is difficult like to take general patterns, or they vary a lot between the different points?
No, actually there is not a large variation.
Okay.
No, of course you always have a variation because you have to.
Yeah.
It could be, when I see these magic results, I always wish to have the magic results in which people is drawing an idea and it's perfectly matching.
No.
But I also, at the same time, I find it a bit synthetic. But I do not find big variation, like usually results are quite clear. You always have the, your weird animals or weird colony, but okay, the dying one, you cannot, or like, for example, in this thermal experiment, this modification for thermal stress, I managed to make them survive during the experiment. So mortality was pretty low, but I suddenly have an unexpected problem that was ants were killing themselves before starting the experiment. I don't know why. You put them in the pendoff and suddenly they got crazy, spreading acid and dying. So, so there was mortality, but it wasn't because of the thermal experiment, because they didn't have the time to teach, to experiment that. So, of course, there is, at least in my case, there is no perfection.
No, and it's difficult to have perfection in an experiment with wild animals, so it's fine. Thank you for your answer.
You're welcome.
We have time for a last question. If there is no last question, I will ask one myself. Regarding the invasive species, at least in bees or wasps, invasive species not only have problems because of competition, but because they can do spillover of new diseases and parasites. Is this something that also occurs in ants or not that much?
Well, actually, this is not my topic, so I'm a bit out of this topic. But invasive species are causing problems because of direct competition. They are very numerous, so they are monopolizing everything. And even though they can find native species that can be highly aggressive, when they are numerically dominant, it's pretty difficult to face them. But as far as I know, there are some groups working also with invasive species as a vector of illnesses. And it seems that they are also spreading some viruses and things like that, some illnesses. And they can, maybe it is also impacting the biodiversity in that term. But this is a topic I have not worked with. I have not been working yet in immunology or in these trends. Yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I think we reached the end of the seminar. Thank you very much, Gema, again for joining us today and for this fantastic presentation.
Thank you.
And I think Juan, Antonio, yeah, an announcement.
Okay.
So this is like for the next seminar.
Yeah,
will be on the 10th of December. Sorry, I go again. At 4:30, in this case, Juan Diego Ibáñez Álamo will be our presenter. You are welcome to join. You can join scanning the QR code. We will also send an invitation via email. And for those who are subscribed in the newsletter, you can receive the news there. If you haven't subscribed to our newsletter, we invite you to do so. To keep updated with all the events we're organizing. So thank you all for attending the seminar today, and yeah, see you on December